Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of NCompass Live. I am your host, Krista Porter, here at the Nebraska Library Commission. NCompass Live is the Commission's weekly webinar series where we cover a variety of topics that may be of interest to libraries. We broadcast the show live every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time, but if you're unable to join us on Wednesdays, that's fine. We do record the show as we're doing today, and it will be posted to our show archives later for you to watch at your convenience. And I'll show you at the end of today's show where you can access all of our show recordings. Both the live show and the recordings are free and open to anyone to watch, so please do share with your friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, anyone you think might be interested in any of the topics we have on NCompass Live. For any of you watching who are not from Nebraska, the Nebraska Library Commission is the state agency for libraries. So we are similar to your whatever state library. So we provide resources and databases and grants and consulting and training to all types of libraries in the state. So we will have shows on NCompass Live for all types of libraries, public, academic, K-12, corrections, museums, archives, historical societies, et cetera, et cetera. Really, our only criteria is that something to do with libraries. We have guest speakers that come in and talk to us from all across Nebraska, all across the country, to talk about cool things they're doing in their libraries or in their areas. But we also have Nebraska Library Commission staff that come on and do presentations for us, and that's what we have today. Joining us this morning is Andrew Sherman here, who is one of our IT people here in Library Development Department at the Nebraska Library Commission. Good morning, Sherm.
Morning, everybody.
And he requested to do a session about passwords.
Yes, I did.
So I was struggling last week in password hell, I believe the word was, with people, and this is something all of us, I think, deal with. It's in not just in libraries, but in personal life. What is my password to the thing? What is, of the, 20 different things I have to log into, which password did I use for which one? So he's going to talk about that today, the importance of that, and how you can keep track of these things so that you always can easily pull up whatever your current password is for stuff. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Sherman, to take it away and tell us how we can all make it a little less of a hellish time with passwords.
Everybody can see my screen okay?
Yes, yep, I see your first slides. Yep, full screen looks good.
All right. So, yeah, Kristen talked a little bit. So last week I was on the road assisting libraries with our Medica grant. If you're not familiar with our Medica grant, the NLC received a grant from Medica Insurance Company to pay for networking equipment upgrades and reboot restore software for the public computers at libraries. And part of that is I travel out and assist the libraries with upgrading their networks, installing the deep freeze reboot restore software we use. I help them install new PCs. We're getting really busy with that, with the advent of Windows 10 going away in October. We have a lot of libraries that have old PCs and are not Windows 11 compatible, so I'm doing a lot of assistance there. And over the time I've been doing this, what is a frustration for me, and Krista mentioned, is when I go on site in a library, one of the first things I ask is if they have all their admin passwords to the stuff I will need to access. And usually they do. What's frustrating is when we get on site and discover that we don't. And then I'm just kind of sitting around waiting for the scramble to figure out what it is or find it, or we run into instances where we discover we don't have the password, and then that requires a reset of the Windows or the networking equipment and that, so we can regain access to it. So that can be very frustrating and time consuming, and that's what kind of prompted me to send Krista saying, oh my gosh, we need to do a NCompass Live about this. So let's go ahead and kick that off. So this gets into a little bit on email addresses for the library too. So this is where almost all your logins that you use for all the different things you have for the library. Usually it's your username or login name is the email address, and then there's a password associated with it. So the first rule is do not use your personal email address. I've seen instances where people are using their personal email address, and then they leave the library and all the accounts and stuff are tied to it, and then you're dependent on that person going back in and changing them if they're allowed to. Some services, once you set that email address, that is the login, and you can't change it. You have to create a new login to regain that access to the different email address. So do not use your personal email address for any library business. It's just not good. Second thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is a registered domain. I'm not sure how many people know what that is. So example, it's kind of having your city or your town or your library or your business have a domain that's registered to it. So what that means is that all your email addresses are at business.com. I have the examples where we have the director at coollibrary.gov or circulation at coollibrary.org, or the one that I really like is if your village or town or city has a domain, the library at villageofcool.gov. So originally when libraries were doing a lot of domain registration for their website, their email addresses and things like that, a lot of it was being done as .org. Since then they added a .gov, and that's where you're seeing a lot of government offices now. So I'm kind of the camp, if your library is supported by your village, town, city, county, using the .gov extension, that's kind of falls into the rules of how that works. If your library is supported, by a trust or foundation or things like that, that would be a .org. It doesn't really matter, whichever one you prefer there. But by having that registered domain, you can then have your email system set up to use that. And that makes for a much more trusted email address. If your library email address is villagelibrary664@gmail.com, as you know, we train our users, if they get an email that they think is spam, the first thing you do is click on the sender's address. So if you're getting an email saying, your McAfee is expiring, which is a common spam email, or your iCloud is about to be deleted, you click on that email address, and obviously if it's iCloud, it should be an @apple.com, or if it's truly from McAfee, it should be an @McAfee.com. And instead it's some bizarre, weird email address. That obviously is an indication that email is a spam. So we want to make sure in the library that we're using an email address that if somebody, is this really from the library? If they click on it and they see it's library@villageofcool.gov, that's very reassuring to them that it is actually the real thing. I think it's worth paying. It's not free, so you have to pay and register a domain, and there's generally an annual fee for that. It tends to run like $15, $20 a year. The easiest way to set it up, how I did it for my libraries, is set it up with some of the big domain registers, like GoDaddy is a big one, and you can put it on your credit card and set it for auto renewal, auto pay, and then you don't have to worry about maybe missing it and then going back into the queue to be available to somebody else. So that's the domain, and then once you have that registered domain, you can have your email. Pretty much it should be for whoever, no matter whose system you're using, you can have that email then branded to use your domain name. And it just really is much more professional, the marketing aspects of it and the trust it provides. I think it's well worth the money to have that registered domain for your email coming out of the library. The other thing to think about is as we transition, so as we have staff start working at the library and stop working at the library, a lot of times, just like in the business world, our business email addresses are first name dot last name at villageofcool.gov or coollibrary.gov. And where that's nice What makes sense and what a lot of businesses and libraries have started adopting is the public face of those emails. They'll brand it as a director at coollibrary.gov or circulation at coollibrary.gov. And how they're doing that is email systems have the ability to do what we call aliases. When I was an email administrator, a very common practice for me is one of my coworkers would get married and change their last name. So what we would do in our email system is we didn't delete that original email address. We would create an alias to it with their new name. And what was nice is that causes no disruption in their email. They can add their tag on their email messages using that new email name, and it keeps everything very clean. So if on your website or on your, if you have automatic emails set up to be sent out from your ILS OPAC catalog, you can use circulation at coollibrary.gov or director at coollibrary.gov as an alias to maybe the email address that's set up with your name. And that makes kind of really future-proof things. And then if you know, one of the staff responsible for circulation or the technical services person leaves, you may put in, and you hire a new person, so they do have a personal email address of, you know, new.hire@coollibrary.gov, but then that alias can be switched to them, and it keeps everything very simple and flowing forward in the future. So just another hint there that can really make life a lot easier. When I was a librarian, I did an Internet 101 course where I talked with my people who would come to take it. And the first thing we would talk about is obviously setting up an email account. And I always told my students to not use the email provided by their ISP. It's a lot bigger deal, I think, if you're, you know, a consumer and it's tied to your home than it may be a library. But the reason for that, and there's several, and what I'm seeing right now is we have a lot of libraries that are moving to fiber. And what is happening is they're switching ISPs, internet service providers. So the problem is their email address is, not to pick on Great Plains, but maybe it's coollibrary@gp.net. And so what's happening is if they're leaving Great Plains for, say, one of the companies that's just out doing fiber, once that account relationship is terminated, that email address goes away, and they've maybe been using it for years for their libraries. So I really highly recommend using something that is not tied, you know, an email that you're getting from your ISP, using a branded Gmail account or something like that. So even though it's Gmail, it's not, you know, coollibrary@gmail.com. You'd have it branded with your domain, so it's coollibrary@coollibrary.gov. So that's something to be very cautious of. It's a big deal in the consumer world because, like here in Omaha, if you move from one part of town to another, the ISPs have, well, in the past, they had carved out areas of town. So if you lived in this town, you had to use Cox. If you lived in this area of town, you had to use ConnectLink. If you lived in this area of town, and so just moving your address, moving from one house to another, would cause your email address to have to be changed, which is a big pain. It's very painful. The other thing that's going on all over the place is these small ISPs that started locally and maybe expanded to a regional are getting bought up by national ISPs. And what happens is that transaction takes place. So initially, that, you know, your email address that still references the old ISP is still there, but what's going to happen is you're going to get an email saying, hey, we are retiring the domain your email is tied to. You need to switch your email to this. And again, it just can cause a huge disruption. So if you're still using the email address provided by your ISP or your telecom provider, what I've seen at some libraries is they've switched ISPs, but their phone lines are still with their local telco. And by still having that relation for the phone lines, they can still continue that use of that old email address. but
Oh,
they're still going to be running into the issues. What happens when the old copper phone line system is no more? Or maybe they're tied to the city and the city decides we're not going to keep supporting this old telephone switch. We're going to switch to web-based phones with voice over IP. And so that relationship with their local telco is gone and those email addresses are gone. It's better to be ahead of this and convert now than do it later when you've got, a hard date that you got to get this done by and communicate out to your community.
You can have that transition time when you need to figure out where is this email address everywhere that needs to be changed.
Yeah, and so if you've used that address to create all these different logins in that, I mean, it's a headache. It's going to be a headache. And my opinion is this is a headache that's worth taking on now while you have access to that email and moving at your own pace than being forced into completing this in a month.
Rushing, yeah.
How much time you have to do it. If the library relocates, generally not a problem, with our small towns and villages. Again, I mentioned if you're a consumer in Omaha and you move from one ISP monopoly area to another, that's a big deal. So just be aware of some of the stuff you can run into if you're still using that old telco or ISP email address for your account. And again, it doesn't look that professional. People expect their local government, their local library to have a domain branded email address. It shows that they can trust it. It's definitely more professional. It helps with the marketing and things like that. One thing that's kind of interesting is I was the business librarian in Connecticut, and I would advise people on their resumes and things like that. And I think it ties a little bit to libraries too. So if you're still using an email address that's .aol.com, comcast.com, hotmail.com, yahoo.com, I'm going to put my hand up. I still have my Yahoo email address.
I was a Hotmail person. I still have a Hotmail.
I kind of use it as my spam registration. So if I have to sign up for something to get access to something I need on the web, I still use my Yahoo account. So when I know I'm going to get spammed, but I want to get access to this, that's the email box it goes to.
Separate. That's a great idea.
Email account that I use for my kind of more professional stuff, I guess is the best way to put it. And it also ties into when you're applying for work. There's not supposed to be age discrimination out there, but if your email address for your resume is AOL, Comcast, Hotmail, Yahoo, or the funny thing is Gmail, if you actually have andrewsherman@gmail.com, that's a pretty good indication you were one of the first people to get a Gmail account, because these days it's probably andrew.sherman, 123456 @gmail.com. So these are indications that this is probably an older person that is applying for this job or contacting us. So again, that's something to think about. Some logins you create let you create a username. So when you go to log in, instead of having to put in your whole email address, you can have a username that you use. If that's what you're using and instead of the email address, make sure that's documented as part of it, that we have a username, an email address, and a password. Some services make you use the username to log in. Some don't care whether you use your username or email address. And then of course it's the email address all the time. But if that username is part of that, make sure that is part of your documentation.
I did just have someone reply to me in my Gmail, because I was one of the first people that did get a Gmail. I knew somebody who was involved and I got an invite type thing. So I have my name. It's of course my maiden name, but that's a whole other story. But it still is just first name, last name at Gmail. And I had someone just like a week ago reply to me and say how it was so cool that I had the old school, just my name for a Gmail account. I'm like,
yeah.
Okay. At least they thought it was cool.
It can kind of make you an area code snob too. If you live in a big city, if you have one of the original area codes, people can tell you recently moved to the big city because you got one of the new area code numbers. kind of that same thing there too.
Yeah. And I just do want to mention everyone too, because I know somebody will ask probably. Yes, the slides will be available afterwards with the recording. So don't worry about trying to write down everything that Sherm's got here. Just sit back and read it. Take your own notes if you want to of anything that you might want to highlight. But you will have the full slides with everything, all these tips he has on here afterwards with the archive.
So this, like I said, we started with the email address because it's so critical to log in, and this is just a good opportunity to really kind of get into that a little bit. So now we're going to get a little more into the best practices here. So passwords. I'm sure you guys have all heard, you know, how you should format your password. It should be at least 8 characters long, a mix of caps, numbers, and special characters, yada, yada, yada. So we're all aware of that. One of the things is there's a lot of password generators out there now, especially if you're using a password manager. I have a password manager I use. It just makes life so much easier because it allows me to sync across all my devices. So my desktop computer, my laptop computers, my phones, my tablets, by having their password manager app loaded on each of my devices and having them in sync, I can log in really easy no matter which device I'm using. My password manager has the ability to generate strong passwords. So it generates, you know, like 20 character passwords with all kinds of stuff on it. And that's great. It makes for a very secure password, but there's no way in heck I could remember it. So, you know, I'm very dependent on my password manager once I've done that. Some of them I do use the generated password on. Some of them I still like to kind of make up my own where it's not quite so painful and it's something I can remember. So if I would be in an instance I need to log in on a device and I don't know, you know, and it's just easier just to get in and put in my password by hand. It's something I can recall and do. So the generated does make for much stronger password, but then you can be very dependent on the password manager to be able to retrieve those back and use them. The other thing, when you set up an account, they have where you can set up your recovery email and phone number and possibly security questions. Security questions is kind of starting to get retired, more in favor, especially now that everybody has smartphones. That's really, I think, the most common way you see to do recovery is, you know, it will send a text to your smartphone or it will send an email to your email account where you click the link to reset or recover your password. And that's getting to be a bigger and bigger deal. I can't tell you how many times I would have people come into the library and say, I don't remember my Gmail password. Can you help me? And so we would click on the reset, and these people never put in a backup email. That's another reason why I keep my Yahoo email, and then my Gmail is my old Yahoo email account is my secondary backup email. So if I get locked out of an account or something, I have that recovery email address that I can use to get back in and reset my password. It's generally on your smartphone now. They send you a text with the code you punch in, go through the reset process. Security questions work for personal. So, you know, I know my first dog's name, I know my first school, but if you're setting up security questions for a library account, you know, what do you use? If you use your personal history and the next person comes along, those security questions are never going to work. I've seen some libraries where they set up security questions as, so birth date is the date the library was founded. You know, and they try to do some stuff like that. That's fine. Again, the person that's trying to get into it would have to have some clues to what you did there. And then is it really that secure? If I could guess, the library used their founding date, maybe the address of their first library building, things like that. It's very for me to say, oh, I forgot my password, guess their security questions, and blow that up. So be aware of recovery options. If it's tied to that phone number and it's your personal phone, again, is it going to do anybody any good? So I used to be the director of this library. I use my personal phone number as the recovery for a bunch of these. I leave, maybe a few months later, hey, I got a call, we don't have this password documented, I don't remember what it is. So maybe I have to assist them with a reset because my phone's going to get the message until they go change the phone number. Or yeah, it's just can be very problematic. So email is probably a better option for recovery, where maybe you use like the village clerk's email address as your recovery email address or something like that. So if you have a staff change and some stuff needs to be reset or recovered, maybe the village clerk or the village office gets that reset email since they're the backup or the secondary address. So something to keep in mind there. Password manager, we talked about it. I have one I pay for. It does a lot more for me than just password management. And it does like auto form fills for addresses, for credit cards, things like that. But I'm not sure how many people are aware of this, but all the major browsers, Google, Edge, Firefox, all come with a password manager built in. It can be really, really handy for a library where the front desk computer has those passwords in. So you go right into your catalog ILS, you go right into your library email, you go right into your WordPress website, things like that. Again, that's great. It's a super nice tool to have. Just be aware of a couple things. One of the nice things, if you actually create a Firefox, Google, Edge, Microsoft login for your browser, account for your browser, is you can turn on what's called syncing, and that allows you to sync those passwords across multiple devices. So if you're a library where you have more than one staff person, staff computer, and you're all using the same browser, you can have those passwords sync between the browsers if you're logging those browsers in with that generated account. So that can make life real easy. So if I go out and set up a new account for the library and save my password and my login information into the browser's password manager, and then other staff needed to access that, if everything's in sync, they have it. The other nice thing is if you go to get a new computer to replace a staff computer, if they're synced, all you have to do is log in with that account again. You have them. If you're not doing that, you can export. And I assist a lot of libraries with this, where they replace the front desk computer, which is their only staff computer. And what I can do is, if they're, let's say they're using Firefox, we can export all their bookmarks, we can export all their logins, passwords they've stored in it, set up the new PC, reinstall Firefox, and then we can import that all back in. So it makes for a real easy transition there. Just because you're using a password manager does not mean that these passwords should not be recorded and written down. They need to be. I have a book I use at home. We've done this at all the libraries I worked at. We have the book of logins, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Two-factor authentication is becoming a big thing now, where whenever you log into a site, it sends a code to your phone. It's fantastic. It's much better security. Probably doesn't work in your library environment if you've got multiple staff and they try and log in, and then they have to get a hold of you because the authentication code went to your email or it went to your phone. So be careful about turning that on. It is better security. I recommend it, but be aware of the ramifications there as other staff try and access it. Again, don't use a personal smartphone. If you have the ability to send the authentication code to your library's email address, library's email that everybody uses, that's the way to do it. I think we're starting to get to the point where it may be necessary for libraries to start thinking about having a smartphone or a tablet that has the chip that allows it to act as a telephone on your mobile provider's network, where the idea is a library-owned smartphone to be used as that authenticating device for people at the library. We may be starting to get there, especially with passkeys, which we'll talk about in a bit. A while back, thumbprint readers, face recognition, that's great for your personal stuff. It's not great on the library computer. Obviously, a lot of desktop computers may not have the webcam to do face recognition. A lot of your laptops do. And if you have a laptop and you travel a lot, that's a great security feature where if somebody steals your laptop, if you've got it set up where it has to have that thumbprint or that face recognition or nobody can get into it, that's really, really good thing to have. On library devices, probably not a good thing to have when it's going to be tied to just an individual. I don't know how many folks are using passkeys these days. Google is really promoting passkeys as kind of the future to get away from passwords. Passkeys kind of get into that same two-factor authentication thing where your passkey, it can be tied to a device or a face recognition file or a thumbprint file. It can be limited to one person. So again, be careful. The passkey security is really good. I'm a big fan of it, but when you have an environment where people need to share account access and stuff, again, it can be problematic. So be careful about that. One that you're told a lot, let's talk about use the same password for multiple logins accounts. There are times, in my opinion, where that is a good thing to do, and there are times that is a bad thing to do. So online accounts, it's good to have different passwords. A lot of them you're using the same email address. So if it's a lot, if it's coollibrary@villageofcool.gov, you're going to use that email address on all your accounts. So that's when it's really important to use different passwords. If somebody gets that email address and has a password associated with this one online account, hackers will try other common accounts to see if it's the same password for that service. So if it's online access, that's where it's really important, I think, that you're mixing your passwords up, that you're not using the same password at multiple online accounts. One thing I like to do, though, when I help libraries set up their computers is we use the same password for kind of hardware. So like the public patron computers at the library, to secure them, we have to secure the BIOS with an administrator password. We have to secure the Windows with the Windows administrator password. We have to secure the reboot restore software with a password. Where it's a physical device like that that resides in the library, having those 3 different logins specific to that computer, use the same password, just makes life so much easier and keeps everything in sync. So that's an instance where I think it definitely pays off to be using the same password for that. If the library maintains and manages their own network equipment, like your router, and it has a login, using that same admin password for that, so you know all your technology devices or hardware, this is the password. That makes perfect sense there. So if it's kind of a physical device in the library, you want to use that same password and keep them all in sync, it makes life a lot easier. If it's an online access, you really do not want to use the same password from, say, your online catalog to your Amazon account to your Baker and Taylor account. They should all be a different password. I can't tell you how many times I walk in the library and the front desk computer has sticky notes stuck to it that has the password for this, the password for that, the password for that. Look, I get it. You know, it makes life easy, especially if you have part-time staff. That the password is right there. It lets them get into stuff. But I'm sure you can all guess that I'm not a big fan of that. You know, it shouldn't be that way. That's where maybe it's more advantageous to take advantage of the password manager on that computer's browser. So, you know, they can just bring it up in the browser and it logs them in, and you don't have the sticky note sitting there that anybody can see, anybody can take. It's just, yeah, it's been that way since day one. You know, when I was in corporate IT, there were strict rules against having your password written on a sticky note sticking on your computer. Just please don't do it. When staff changes, this can be very painful when you have a change of staff. You know, generally it's security. If it's a staff member that knows all your passwords, you should go change them. and it is a pain, especially if you have a lot of them. The urgency to do so, I think, depends on whether it's a good or a bad departure. You know, if somebody is retiring or they're taking another job and the relationship is good, you probably still want to get them updated, but you're not under pressure to do it. If it's a bad departure, you know, if somebody's being fired, you probably need to get right on it and make sure those passwords are updated to prevent any repercussions from occurring there. Again, it gets back to, is that online or physical access? Your online ones would be the ones to go after first. Those are the ones that they could access from a computer anywhere else in the world. Is kind of the rule. If I can log into this account on any computer from anywhere, those passwords should not be duplicated. And if I have a staff person leave on bad terms, I should get out and change that immediately. If it's something in the library that requires physical access, that could be like a second priority to get out and get changed, or possibly leave them alone. Maybe that's not going to be a big deal then. Krista, do we have any questions on anything?
I don't see anything. Trying to open up the right box. Yes. No, just a question you mentioned, and I know you've got that coming up on the next slides about the having a binder, how to keep track of all of these things, not password manager related, but talking about a binder. I wanted to know more about that, because you said don't write it on a sticky note, but you did mention something about a binder, and I know that's coming up. So
yep. So we're going to be getting to that. So that's pretty much kind of you know, my rules and opinions on how to set up your passwords and when they need to be changed and maintained. So now we're going to talk about, and this goes right back to where I was with Krista last week, complaining about being in password hell. Document, document, document. All the logins the library uses must be documented. I'm a big, and maybe it's because I'm an old guy, I'm a big fan of writing them down. And when I say write them down, I don't mean I have this password on this scrap of paper I tore off, and I have this password on this sticky note, and I have this password where I printed out the page from the account that I initially set up and then wrote the password on it. And I have them in a manila envelope, and they're all jumbled around and they're not organized. And when I have to go find a password, I have to dump everything out of this folder and start looking and trying to figure out, you know, I have a sticky note that's got a login name and a password, but nobody wrote down what it's for, so I have no idea. It just, you know, or I have it, but it got changed and it never got documented, so I'm stuck. Be very organized in the way you document all the logins the library uses. I'm a big fan of taking a 3-ring binder, having a page dedicated to every login, even if it's just our Amazon login is this email address and this password. The nice thing, if you have all that extra space there, if you would change that password, you can note the password got changed on this date. And what's nice is you keep a record of the old password, and then you have the date that it was changed to the new password. Don't black out the old password, don't throw it away. Some accounts allow you to use that old password as a recovery function, where I forgot my password. Or I just went and changed the password and I typoed it, and I cannot figure out what I typed wrong, whether it was a capital or a special character. Some services will prompt you saying, hey, you forgot your password. What was one of the old passwords you used before? And if you can correctly answer that, they will let you continue in the password reset process. So it can be very valuable to have that old password still be retained and legible in that sheet that you're documenting that login on. And then if you leave space for those changes, if you're one of the people that's diligent about changing your passwords, a lot of the account services like Google and stuff actually search the dark web. And if the password you have with them comes up in the web that somebody has got it from somewhere else, you may get an email alert saying this password is compromised. We found it in the dark web. That's a pretty good prompt to go update your password for that service. Or if you're using that same password across multiple services, to go update those. So by having that space, you have the room to be able to write the new password in and the date and why it was changed. We got a security alert, we had a staff person leave. It's great to have all that documentation of what the password was changed to, the date it was changed, and why you changed it.
There are some,
Okay.
you're talking about saving the previous password. There are some, you said just for like password recovery, there are some systems that require you to enter your old password before you can change it to the new one too. So
Yep.
even if they, oh, I forgot my password, so I'm just going to make up a new one. I know one system we use with the state for something does that, but also E-rate. In order to change your password, you have to first enter, well, what is your current one? And then they say, and then you put in what your new one's going to be. So
Yep.
just check it. Right. I have a thing here that has, I think E-rate is one that says it can't be, you can't have the same password from the last like 8 times you changed it. So if it's 9 or 10, then you can reuse old passwords. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's a good thing or not.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Chris. I probably should add this. Some of them don't let you use a previous password.
Right.
So you try and change it to a password and they're like, you can't use that. You used it before. Well, if you have that documented on your sheet,
You had
you
known that.
look
Yeah.
and see, oh, we used that password before. I'm going to have to use a different one.
Yeah.
So that, again, that's a good, I should add that in there, Krista. That's a great catch. Don't discard your old logins. So if you have an account or maybe a service the library is no longer using, maybe know that, hey, we switched from this ILS to this ILS, but keep that old information out there. And I'll tell you why. A great example is if you're doing, this is one I see at libraries all the time, is TechSoup. Is everybody familiar with TechSoup?
Yes.
TechSoup is a nonprofit that came out of the BTOP days when the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gave a bunch of money for libraries to buy computers. Krista knows all about this too. So
we refer people there all the time. Whenever you all apply for any grants from us and you haven't already said you're going to TechSoup and there's something that is software that you're going to be using the grant for, you've probably heard us tell you, hey, go to TechSoup and look for it there.
So this is one I see a lot where library staff has changed and maybe the new staff is not familiar with TechSoup and how it can save them a lot of money on like Office for their computers, things like that. So what happens is they go to log in and they go into create a new account, and then TechSoup says that email address has already been used. Or they're trying to connect to another service and it says that email address has already been used. What that's telling us is that previous staff had used the library's email address to set an account up, that I'm flipping through my notebook and I have no record of it. What may have happened is, we had a staff member that was using this. They left. We couldn't think of any reason why we would go use that again, and we tore the page out and fed it through the shredder. Keep it in the book. Make a note on it that, we're not currently using this. Maybe you put it to the back of the book, under the tab of unused account logins. And I see this with TechSoup a lot. Somebody comes in, they're a new staff member of the library. We're getting new computers. I said, hey, if you go out and get your TechSoup account set up, we can get Microsoft Office for $40 a pop for the new computers. And I'm like, oh, wow, that costs $150 if I buy it brand new. That's a great deal. And they go to create their TechSoup account to find out the library already has one and it was not documented. You have to call TechSoup. You have to go through a big rigmarole to get the count reset, where if it's just documented and in the binder, life is so much easier. So do not throw the old logins away. It's kind of like burning a bridge. Never burn a bridge, because the world's a small world. You don't know when that person's going to come back into your life again. It's kind of the same thing with logins. Don't throw the old logins away. Don't throw them in the fire. Keep them documented. Keep them in your binder. And you never know, if you go back to use it again, it just can make life a lot easier, especially as we enter the online days, where a lot of companies don't have an 800 number you call and you get somebody to help. You get the automated bot and you're trying to do the password reset, and the bot has these rules it follows, and you may be stuck where you're only, if this is a service you really need to use, The only way you may be getting back into it is to set up a new login, and it requires a different email address, which is a whole nother can of worms. So keep them. Keep them in a document computer. I have terrible handwriting. Maybe that makes my written password journal safer if I'm the only one that can read it. But I know libraries that keep all their passwords in a Word document or Excel spreadsheet. That's not the end of the world. There's a few precautions you should take if that's how you want to do it. It shouldn't be sitting out in a cloud account. It should be sitting on the hard drive of the computer. It should be on a USB drive that can be unplugged and kept somewhere, probably kept on multiple USB drives, one at the library, one at your house or at the village office that's separate as a backup. You know the rule for backups. If your backup sits in the same place as what's being backed up, you don't have a backup. If it burns down, floods, gets hit by a tornado, it's all gone. So backups have to be kept off-site. Your binder for your passwords, it should be duplicated. There should be a copy kept off-site, or if you have a, the fireproof safe or something like that, that's where your backup needs to be kept. Word, Excel, almost any document creation file, word processing file, lets you password protect a file. So should I password protect it? And obviously everybody would need to know what the password is to re-access that file, but it keeps it from being read by somebody that doesn't have the password to get to it. If they steal the file, if it's password protected, it's encrypted, they won't be able to get into it. So definitely take advantage of the password protection features in your word processor or spreadsheet of choice and protect it. Again, if it's a Word or Excel document, you should have an up-to-date printout. Maybe that's your backup, is where you made a change to it, you printed it out, or you printed out that changed page. If yours runs multiple pages, it gets put in your binder, a copy gets taken off site, and that binder is updated, so on and so forth. Have the printout of it also. There's no reason not to. All you have to do is file, print, and you got it. If you want to be real paranoid like I am, if somebody hacks your computer, the first thing they're going to do is do searches for login, password, username, probably accounts. Account is probably not a good word to use either. Maybe I should add it there. The search feature in Windows Explorer not only looks for the titles of documents, but it looks for the content in the document. So if your login file, you have it called, something like flowers or dogs, or so it doesn't obviously scream, this is where we keep all our logins. But if you have the columns labeled login, password, username, or account number, or things like that, that search will still retrieve that file because that search term is in it. So that makes it a little harder to protect that file. Probably password protection would be a much better way to go with that, as long as that password is recorded and written down somewhere. So if you forget what the password is for your passwords file, you've got somewhere to go get it. Any questions on any of that?
So yes, I know some people have joined since we started. I've been keeping track of the numbers and whatnot. If you do have any questions, type into the questions section of your GoToWebinar interface, and I've got that open here on my computer. Sherm can answer anything you want to know more about. If you've had any issues with passwords or need more tips or anything, definitely type in there. I don't see anything right now.
Right.
Anything
so
more?
we already mentioned keep it up to date. Keep it up to date. On a busy day, you change a password and you think, oh, I'll fix it in the binder tomorrow. Don't fix it in the binder tomorrow. If you're going to go to the effort to change the password, go to your binder, update it right when you do it so you have it. What if you change the password and then the next morning you get up and you're like, oh, shoot, what did I change that password to?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to go there. If you're going to make the password change, you should have that binder right there in front of you when you make the change, where you're recording the change, so you have it, so we don't have to go through any pain and suffering. Plus, it's documented, you have it. The backup copy needs to get that update too. So make sure that's always happening and the backup copy offsite. Staff access, is this binder something that sits out at the front desk? Is it something that sits in the back office? Does the staff need to readily have access to it to be able to look? That's really going to be dependent on, how you run the library and the environment it's in. So, what works best for you there with, some idea of making sure that, it's still fairly secure or something. Maybe it sits out at the desk during the day, but it gets locked up with the cash tray out of the register and stuff at night. That's not a bad process. Treating it like money is a good way to do it. That's what I've done at some of my previous libraries, where we have a desk where it was staff accessible, and maybe there's the staff version and the director's version of this book, where the director has a book that has everything in it, and the staff has the book that's just like the access to their ILS, OPAC, their overdrive, just the things that the front desk staff would need access to on a regular basis, something to think about. Now we're going to just kind of run through a list of common library logins. If you have your binder or you don't have your binder, you're going to put one together. Here's kind of a list of the logins that you hopefully have and have documented. Obviously, the most important one, software-wise, is going to be the catalog, ILS, OPAC, whatever term you use for it. One thing to note is that those systems almost always have multiple levels of access and rights. So generally, there's one super login that lets you do anything you want to in the catalog, the ILS, the OPAC. And then you can set up additional logins that only allow specific functionality to be accessed. At my libraries, I always set up what we call the front desk login and the administrator login at a minimum. So the administrator login allowed me to go change rules and how things worked for the library. But the front desk login, especially if you have part-time staff, maybe all they can do with that login is they can check materials in and out, maybe make notes for an item's come back damaged, or they get a call that this item is missing. They're able to add a note to the account. Possibly you let them make a status change that this item is missing. If they're doing shelf reading and they see, their list says this book should be here and it's not, it allows them to come back to the front desk computer and mark the item is missing, where a report can be later generated to go do a search. But the nice thing is it doesn't let them actually modify an item's description or let them change where how its shelf label reads and stuff. You're kind of protecting yourself from, less experienced staff or staff with less responsibilities from getting into a section of the catalog and making changes and stuff that they shouldn't be. If your software system, whatever one we're talking about, has the ability to support different logins, different levels of access, I highly recommend taking advantage of it. Possibly every staff has their own catalog login that they use, and when they leave, that login gets terminated. It's a very, very good way to keep everything nice and secure and makes staff transition very easy. When this person leaves, we disable the login, and when the new person starts, we create a login for them. It's their login and it's what they use. Other services, email, obviously, your social media website, so your TikTok account, your Facebook account. If you're still on X, Twitter, the login for that. If you maintain a website for your library, the login for your WordPress website, things like that. Overdrive Libby, you have an administrator account for your library that lets you go out and assist and fix issues for your patrons when they have issues with Overdrive Libby. Nebraska Access, you have a password for the library for that. Another thing
you've mentioned static IP address there. We don't have that anymore with Nebraska Access. I think we used to do that. Yeah, we'll update that. Yeah, I double checked with Alana Novotny is the person here who sends out your passwords every year to the library directors who would know that. And I double checked with her because I knew we had, and that they also send out passwords. So there was like a choice, but now it's just the passwords that we send out every year on August 1st. The passwords are changed once a year for Nebraska Access. And right before that, you would get an email, I think about a month or so beforehand, you get an email from Alana saying, here's your library's new password. And each library has their own personalized passwords for your library for each level of access we have to Nebraska Access.
Thanks for that update, Krista. I will get the presentation corrected to get rid of that static IP address.
We had them, and then as was one of those technical things behind the scenes that it couldn't do it anymore, so we just went to just plain old passwords now.
Yeah, doing authentication through static IP address is kind of an old school thing. It's really kind of going away, but it still has its uses. It's a nice feature, but I won't get into a lot of detail on that. E-rate, if you have an E-rate account, and you're forced, and E-rate's a great example. You are forced to change your password with E-rate on a regular basis.
Every 60 to 90 days, I forget exactly what it is, but yeah.
Yeah, your library may be subscribing to services that also require, every so many months, every so many logins, you're forced to change your password. When you get that, I can't emphasize enough, that's when you go get your binder, plop it down in front of you at the desk, and make that change and record it. Don't wait till later, don't wait till the next day. As soon as you make that change, make sure it's documented in your binder or in your password file on the computer. Lots of other things out there libraries use. You may have a Goodreads account, you may have a book page account, all kinds of stuff out there that different libraries use, and you want to make sure that everyone is documented in that binder. Purchasing, this tends to be one that I sometimes see get missed too. So if the library is buying a lot of stuff through Amazon, books, business supplies, things like that, you have an Amazon login that has to be documented. They bought Audible, so it's possible you're buying audiobooks for the library still. That needs to be documented as part of that. Almost every library I worked at, we were a Baker and Taylor customer, so that's one that definitely should be documented. Baker and Taylor does let you set up separate logins for the staff. So maybe the children's librarian has a login for buying children's books. Your adult librarian has a login for buying adult books. Maybe your accounting person, your bookkeeper has a login for pulling the account information. So just be really aware of that. Purchasing kind of drops into accounting. I see a lot of libraries that use QuickBooks if they're responsible for keeping their own books and cutting their own checks. It's the most widely used bookkeeping software in the US. There is obviously a fee to use it, but lots of small businesses, lots of small government offices, lots of libraries use QuickBooks. If you're not using an accounting package and something you're interested in, there's a really good one called Zoho Books. I've seen some libraries that use it. They have a kind of a free level that's available, and then you can pay for subscription with more features. Those are the two that I think are pretty widely used, and be aware that you may have a login for that you need to retain and keep too. Hardware wise, this is where I kind of found into password hell last week. I was out to help assist with the computers. We discovered we did not have the admin password to their Windows computers. The only way to overcome that is to reinstall Windows on the computers. So instead of doing a quick installation of deep freeze, I got to reinstall Windows on all the computers from scratch and reset everything up from scratch to be able to complete the deep freeze install and protect those computers. That was kind of my prompt for this one. So, and generally on your computers that you set up for the public, you'll have an admin staff login with administrator rights that's password protected, and you'll have a non-password protected login called patron or public, whatever you call it. And when people use the computer, that's what the computer's logged in, so they don't have the administrator rights, the ability to make any changes. Every library computer should have those 2 logins. And I'll talk about why if we get to the bottom of this page. This is again a great instance where if you want to have the same administrator password for the Windows operating system, the reboot restore software, maybe the makerspace software if you're using Adobe. Adobe is getting problematic these days. I'll just mention it. For Adobe, you have to have a login. So if you're putting Adobe Creative Suite on a computer for people to use the library, it has to be actively logged in for them to use it. If that software is logged in, they have access to the account, the Adobe account it's set up with. Like they might have made a change where if you go to the account, they prompt you for the password again, but if you've given it to them, they have it. And the other problem, why that's problematic and why we're running into this with some other services, is Adobe requires that you have a credit card on file, which makes it really dangerous because depending how you make that available to your public and you have a credit card on file in your Adobe account, they could be buying clip art through Adobe, they could be buying fonts through Adobe, and we don't want that to happen. At a library I worked at, we would set our Adobe up with a pre-purchase credit card that only had $10 on it, and then we would spend the 10 bucks, so it had a valid credit card number on the account, but there was no money in the account, so we didn't have to worry about people purchasing stuff with the Adobe account. And then we logged them into it. When they came in and wanted to set up one of our computers that had Creative Suite, staff would have to log them into the Adobe account, so if they did not have the login to do it. It's problematic. It can be a challenge on a busy day, but it's the best way to set that up. So be aware of some of the software you use, some of the services you use may have that limitation, and depending whether it's something you make available to the public or not, you'll have to have some rules or procedures for how you're going to do that. Printers, if you get a new printer in, some of them they force you to set an administrator password when you first set up the printer to keep people out of the network settings and things like that. So again, this is a good example where if we have that in-house hardware, that administrator password that I used on my Windows operating system would be a good one to use in my printers too. That plays right into your network equipment too. So your firewall router, if you have a smart switch, if you have a mesh Wi-Fi network, WAPs that have their own management software, if you want to use that same administrator password across all that hardware, that just makes life really, really easy for everybody, and it makes it easy to document. One thing I want to mention is Wi-Fi networks. There's 2 things to be aware about Wi-Fi networks when you set up a password. The new Wi-Fi 7 standard is out, and if you're using, I don't want to go too deep into this, but if you're using the new high-speed 6 gigahertz band on a Wi-Fi 7 router, they use a new security standard called WPA3. And WPA3 actually encrypts the connection whether a password is used with it or not. Most libraries are going to have older routers than that are using the 2.4 or the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi bands. Those use an older security standard called WPA2. And the key difference there is if I set up a guest Wi-Fi network with no password and I have the community using it, if you connect to a no password Wi-Fi network, your connection on the network is not encrypted, which means you're transmitting those packets on the network in the clear. So if a hacker decides to plop down at your library, your coffee shop, and collect packets out of the air, if you have somebody using the Wi-Fi network without a password, they can collect those packets and see the data, see what's being sent. A lot of websites now have moved from HTTP to what we call HTTPS. So if I connect to my bank or I connect to my Gmail, I get switched to an HTTPS website. So the traffic between the browser I'm using on the computer and the communication with that website is encrypted. So I'm protected even if I'm not using a password protected Wi-Fi network. If you do put a password on your guest Wi-Fi network, that's good. That forces that encryption, which is good for security. Don't make the Wi-Fi password some pain in the butt thing for your people. Just don't do it. It just has to be a password to force encryption. It doesn't have to be 8 characters long with a mixture of caps, numbers, special characters. You know, make it like LUV books, something super easy. Make
Something
it all
easy and fun. Most places
don't
do.
put numbers in it. Don't put special characters in it. Just make it really simple for people to use your public Wi-Fi network. My preference is to have a secured Wi-Fi network for the staff that is password protected, and then to have a non-password protected Wi-Fi network for the public. The reason I would like to do that is then the library's Wi-Fi network is available 24/7. So if somebody's sitting on the bench from the library when the library's not open, they don't have to know the Wi-Fi password. I've seen libraries where they put a signage up in their window that says our Wi-Fi password is this. That's great if that's how you want to do it. Libraries that I've assisted that are in big tourist destinations, like libraries around the McConaughey area or other big tourist destinations, not having a password on your Wi-Fi lets us people who drive through town in the evening in their RV or with their camper or whatever, it gives them a Wi-Fi network that they can readily access and use, which makes them happy, helps support your community, maybe helps out with the tourism business. If you're not going to do that, maybe think about at least again having that signage in the window that says, hey, our Wi-Fi password is this. So if they pull up the Wi-Fi at the library, they can see it, put it in, they have a good secured connection, and yet it's readily accessible and they can do what they need to do with it. I do have some libraries that do not make their Wi-Fi available 24/7 just because they've had an incident, after hours, or they don't want people hanging around the library after hours. So they have their Wi-Fi router set up to disable the Wi-Fi between, say, 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., things like that. That's great if you want to do that. This gets back into, we'll talk about it in a minute, why the library should have that administrator level access to their Wi-Fi network. That lets you change the Wi-Fi password, which could be a really nice thing to have. Some libraries, I know, they change their Wi-Fi password every week. I had one library that I assisted, they were right next door to an apartment building, and all their internet bandwidth was being used up because everybody in this apartment building could access the library's Wi-Fi. So what would happen is they would be streaming movies and music from their apartment, and then the internet was totally unusable because they had so much traffic on it. And so what we did was we got them set up with the admin access so they could go out and change their Wi-Fi password every week. That helped a lot. We also did some stuff in their router where we could block devices. So like the first time I was there, we went through everything in their router that was connected to it. If it said Roku, Chromecast, Fire Stick, those are only used for streaming video music. We blocked those devices so they could no longer connect to their Wi-Fi network, which helped a lot too. So anyway, there's some good reasons there why the library should have admin access to it. My rule is if it's a piece of hardware the library has bought and paid for, you should have the admin access to it. 2 reasons for that. It's your box, you own it, you shouldn't be held hostage by an IT vendor where if you have issues with their support, if you decide to fire them and get somebody new, you're dependent on them coughing up that stuff. It's a gamble I don't like to take. I think, and the other reason they may tell you is, well, We use the same password for multiple clients. Well, that's kind of a red flag right there. And secondly, almost any of the devices these days allow you to set up multiple admin logins. So your IT vendor should have the admin login they use, but there should be an admin login set up for the library. Even if you don't use it, even if you call them to make your changes, you should have access to it. That allows, like, if you have me come out to do a technology review, or if we want to set up DNS filter, I can access the device and see how it's configured and say, we can do DNS filter on this. I can turn it on, or we'll work with, give my contact information to your IT vendor. I will work with them. I have a couple libraries that are using IT support that their village has contracted under. Unfortunately, they're getting very poor levels of support. They get a new printer, and then they wait weeks to get their new printer installed because they can't get the IT vendor to go into all their computers and add the printer to it. Where if you have that Windows admin access, it's super quick and easy to do. There's no reason why you couldn't do it yourself, or I couldn't assist you with it. So having that admin login is really important. Where you'll see where that may not be possible, if your ISP provides the router for your library, they will retain control of that because it's their router. The library rents it and pays for the service. That's totally okay because technically it is their box, and I can understand why they don't want people in messing with it. But if the router is bought and paid for by the library, the firewall is bought and paid for by the library, the computers, the printers are bought and paid for by the library, have admin access to it. I cannot stress that enough. One last thing I want to talk about, logins for security. This is a rule from my early days in IT, is you have an administrator login and you have the login you use for daily use. The most common example I will put on this is your Windows computer. A lot of people aren't aware of, when you set up your new computer and you go through the process Microsoft makes you walk through, that initial login you create has full administrator rights. So you can make any changes you want to that computer. You can install software, remove software, add devices, remove devices. That's great if you're the only user of that computer. If anybody else is using that computer, there should be another login created under Windows that's called, for the public patron computers, patron. For staff, maybe you have a admin login, a staff login, and staff is set up as a local user where they don't have administrator rights. That's just really good security practice. It prevents people who shouldn't be installing or modifying things on the computers. The other thing it prevents is if they would be out on the web and get hit with an attempt to install malware, adware, things like that. A lot of times, if they don't have administrator rights, the box will pop up and it says, do you want to install this, yes or no? If you click on the yes and you don't have administrator rights, you have to put the administrator password in, or you're not installing anything. If they're using that computer every day as an administrator, a login with administrator rights, that box pops up, it's yes or no, you click yes, it goes. Or if it's smart malware, you won't even see the box. It'll see it has administrator rights and it just installs. So any computer that has more than one user on it should not be used with a login that has administrator rights. None of my computers that I use with administrator rights. I have another login set up, I just call it Sherm, and that is just a local user that does not have administrator rights. So if I'm working on something and suddenly that box pops up and it wants to install something, I go digging into it about why am I getting this? Why does it need to install something on the computer? And the other nice thing is if the box pops off and I'm distracted and I hit yes, it then prompts me for the password, which kind of gives me that second chance to say, oh, wait a minute, no, that's not good. Whereas if you're using the computer with administrator rights and that box props and you click the yes, it's going to install. So again, I highly recommend never using, especially a Windows login on your computer on your daily use that has administrator rights. Save that for only when you're adding software, deleting software, adding hardware, deleting hardware, so on and so forth. That protects. A great example, again, on the public patron computers is you can have the printers all set up the way you want, and then if they don't have administrator access, nobody can go in and mess with the printing settings and stuff. I know how much as a librarian I love troubleshooting printer issues. Not letting people create them for you is really, really good practice. So that pretty much wraps up.
Yeah, does anybody have any last minute desperate questions you want to ask of Sherm right now? You can type in the question section. As you all know, and it's great, everyone is stuck around even though we're running long, yes.
I always run long. People probably should know that about me.
And that's great. We get all the information you need though. Do type in any questions you want to ask of him now. Otherwise, there is his contact info there on the screen, of course. And anything you do want to know, if you do need help with your library's tech, that's why we have him on staff here now to help out with that. Reach out to him with any questions you have. If you want to know about that Medica grant and getting some of that equipment, we're about halfway through the funding.
We're about halfway through the money, so we still got a pretty good chunk to get through. The Medica grant again pays for the reboot restore software on your public patron computers, and it pays for new network equipment. And we also have a travel allowance on it too that allows me to come out and visit your library.
Right, so he can come and visit, do a tech review for you, install this actual equipment for you, so you're not just left there on your own.
Or if you have a really good IT vendor that you want to work with, I can work with them to purchase the equipment through them that they come out and install on the library's behalf. I've done that for several of our libraries too.
Yeah. Yep. We do have thank yous coming in. Thanks, great information. Thank you, Percentage. I look forward to working with you, Sherm, in the very near future. So this must be library year.
Yeah. So again, my one takeaway today would be back to that screen that's document, document, document. Have them all written down. As soon as you go to make a change, have that binder in front of you. Immediately record the change so you have it. Your predecessors will love you for it. You'll be the library director, library assistant that had beautiful documentation that made their life a dream, when they came into their new role at your library.
Yes. All right. I don't see any other questions coming in. That's fine. And this is also links to on the previous sessions that Sherm has done on NCompass Live for us about various other tech issues that you can watch those recordings for if you want to. I'm just waiting to see if anybody has anything else they want to ask. No. All right. Thank you, Sherm, for joining us and telling us all about passwords. I'm going to pull presenter control back to my screen here so I can do a little wrap up. Yeah, thank you so much, Sherm. It's always great to have you on the show because I think you do a great job of just, clearly explaining a lot of this tech stuff that is very, I'm sure, intimidating, scary, unknown to a lot of people. Library directors, library staff, this isn't their main thing in their job a lot of the times, and having you available to make it accessible is very important.
Well, again, I am here to help. So if this or any other technology issues arise at your library and you want some consulting, some assistance, some advice, please reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. All right. Thank you. And thank you everyone for being with us today. I'm going to pop over to our NCompass Live main page here. If you do use whatever is your search engine of choice to look up our show, type in NCompass Live, the name of the show. We're the only thing on the internet. You'll come up with our main page here and our archive page here. Here is our upcoming shows, and I said, as you said at the beginning, today's show has been recorded, and it will be posted to our show archives, which the link is right here underneath all of our upcoming shows. And we did break the timing for CE for this episode. It'll be 1.5 CE you'll earn on continuing education credits that we offer here through the Library Commission for today's show, either watching this, if you watch this live show, or if you watch the archive.
Well, it's good to know. So anytime I present, we know we're going to get a 1.5 credit out.
Most likely, yes. If you're looking for extra CE, yeah, for you or your library boards, yeah. So the show will be up here at the top of the page. We'll have a link to the recording on the Library Commission's YouTube channel and a link to Sherm slides as well. Everyone who attended today's show and registered for today's show will get an email from me when I push it out to our mailing lists, letting you know the recording is available. We also have a Facebook page for NCompass Live. We post on there. Here's a reminder to log in today's show, here's we're announcing a recording of the previous week's show. So you can follow us on Facebook if you like to use Facebook. We use the hashtag NCompLive to post anything here, and also to the Library Commission's Instagram account, and we also still have Twitter. So if you want to keep up with us on social media, that's where we are. Oops, over here. You can also search our show archive to see if we've done anything on a particular topic. You can search the most recent 12 months only if you want something just current, or the full show archives. So if you're looking for, wondering if we did something about something, or if you want to look for one of Sherm's sessions, you can type in his name here and see if it comes up. But do pay attention as you are watching any of our archives. You see this is a really, really long list, and I'm not going to scroll down through the whole thing because, as you can see, it's huge. But this goes back to when, this is our full show archive, going back to when NCompass Live first premiered, which was in January 2009. So this year is the 17th year of NCompass Live, and we are still going strong, as you can see. But just pay attention when you do watch any of our old shows to the original broadcast date. There's always a date here, so you know when the show first happened. Some shows we find to watch, they'll stand the test of time, still be good, useful resources, but some things will be old and outdated. Resources may have changed drastically. Technology, obviously, have changed drastically over the last 10, 15 years. People will work at different places than when they first presented for us. You never know. So just pay attention to those, that original broadcast date if you do watch anything old. But this is something that we do. We keep things, librarians do. We keep things for historical purposes. And as long as we have a place to host all of our show archives, which is right now is the Library Commission's YouTube channel, we will always keep them up there and available for you. So that's our archive. The recording for today's show should be up and ready by the end of the day tomorrow, as long as GoToWebinar and YouTube cooperate with me. So look for that email sometime tomorrow. Excuse me. So that will wrap it up today's show. We have our shows fully booked out through all of May and all of June are booked. So you can see what we have coming up over the next couple of months. And next week, it is the last Wednesday of the month. So that means it is Pretty Sweet Tech Day, another techie show. This is where, and you can see I've got the May date and the June date on here too. Always the last Wednesday of the month usually is when Amanda Sweet, our technology innovation librarian, comes on and does a presentation about something tech related. We do things other times of the month, of course, as we did just today, but you can always depend on the last Wednesday of the month should be Amanda. And next week, she is talking about the Computers and Libraries Conference, which happened last month at the end of the month. She attended, and she's going to talk about some of the cool and interesting things she learned about at Computers and Libraries 2025. She attended it in Washington, D.C. So do sign up for that and any of our other upcoming shows that we have on the schedule. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Sherm. Good to see you.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, I hope we'll see you all on a future episode of NCompass Live. Bye-bye.